The day I found out about my tumor, my girlfriend and her first love were having a small wedding. She explained his final wish was to be my groom. And what about me? What am I? It hit me then. My decade of waiting and efforts didn't hold a candle to a single tear from her first love. When Tina placed the wedding ring on the groom's finger, the room erupted in applause. The atmosphere was electric. He lifted her veil. At that moment, I finally saw the person she once dreamt about day and night. Eric, in his suit, was so handsome it was heart-stopping. He made me feel inadequate. The crowd started chanting, "Kiss, kiss." Eric leaned in slightly. Tina seemed hesitant but eventually kissed his cheek. Right then, she caught sight of me under the tree. This was a wedding taking place at the hospital. It brought a touch of romance and warmth to this typically solemn place. And this woman who swore she'd love me forever, who promised me a dreamy wedding, was now holding someone else's hand, making vows of eternal commitment. I stood there, frozen. My hands and feet were cold. A breeze swept past, chilling my face. The wedding paused awkwardly because of me. Who's that? What's he doing here? He can't be here to crash the wedding. He doesn't compare to the groom, they whispered. All eyes turned on me, judgmental and disapproving, like I was ruining a perfect love story. Eric saw me too. He frowned ever so slightly, as beautiful as a crafted sculpture. Tina panicked, pulling away from him and trying to come after me. Ben, Eric held her arm, looking at me with a sad expression. Tina, the wedding can't happen without the bride. This woman, usually so decisive and cool, hesitated. She looked at me, but her body leaned towards Eric. What was I waiting for anyway? Sticking around would only disgrace me further. She wasn't going to choose me. I turned and walked away. Ben. Tina called out, taking a few steps toward me. But chaos erupted as someone shouted behind her, "Eric!" In the commotion, she didn't manage to follow me. I didn't sleep at all that night. Tina didn't return either. Our last chat was still sitting on that simple message. Tina, when you're back, I have something to tell you. But I never expected she'd surprise me this way. The day I found out about my tumor, my love was walking down the aisle with someone else. I genuinely thought she was on a business trip. I thought she was too busy even to reply to my messages. Turns out she was busy getting married. She turned all my waiting and dreams into a joke. I crumpled up the tumor report. It no longer mattered. When I met Tina, she had just broken up with Eric. She was hit hard by career and love setbacks, and my timing was just right. I offered her comfort. I encouraged her. It took me 7 years, accompanying her from low to high. 7 years. Later she said she wanted to marry me. I thought she felt grateful or guilty. But she said, "I don't know when it started, but my eyes settled on you, and I haven't been able to look away since." In that moment, words couldn't describe how I felt. She didn't know. Long ago, she had already imprinted herself on my heart. I was the one always chasing her shadow. And on that day, my secret love finally bloomed and bore fruit. I thought I finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel. I truly believed that. But Eric's appearance shattered all my illusions. I was only fooling myself. She never forgot about him. As the last rays of sunset disappeared, I finally decided to leave. Just when I finished packing, I heard a noise at the door. Tina walked in, looking exhausted. "Ben, that wedding doesn't count." I looked at her quietly, not saying a word. Eric has ALS. He wanted to be a groom once. For an instant, I couldn't tell if her pain was for my lack of understanding or for Eric's waning life. But probably the latter. She rarely seemed upset because of me. When I saw him with the suit today, he asked me to go through the ceremony with him. A sadness I couldn't describe lingered in her eyes. Ben, I couldn't say no. He's dying. Say no? Did she really consider saying no? The smile on her face at the wedding was no lie. She married the man she longed for in her youth. She once dreamed of marrying him. I asked, when did he come back? Was it when we went to pick rings? Really, there had been signs all along. That day, she took a call. She's usually so composed, especially since her career soared these past years, showing fewer emotions. But that day she seemed distracted. Her eyes showed a sorrow and urgency I couldn't grasp. She said work had issues she needed to handle. I believed her. Later on, she went on a business trip for a few days. After returning, she often seemed lost in thought. I went out of my way to cheer her up during that time. I genuinely believed she had run into some tough situation. I wanted to ease her worries. Little did I know, her concern was for another man. I continued, "Those days on your trip, were you with him?" She said nothing. She never felt the need to lie to me, but she made an exception for Eric. Suddenly, I realized I might not know her at all. Yet her face, her calm eyes, her unfeeling lips were undeniably hers. I let out a bitter laugh. "Tina, let's end this." She remained silent, standing in front of me, unmoving. Her lips tightened like she wanted to speak but didn't. I pushed my suitcase, ready to walk past her and go. She grabbed my wrist, her eyebrows knitted tight, voice hoarse. "Ben, don't go." I shook off her hand. I went to the hospital, got checked out, and scheduled surgery. Just as I got downstairs, I ran into Eric. He looked at me with a broad smile, confidently introducing himself. "Hi, I'm Eric." He's into ballet. Great physique, good looks. Standing next to him, the difference was clear. Back when Tina's career failed, he left her and went abroad to pursue further studies. Just like that. Maybe we all crave what we can't have. What we can't get always feels the best. That's why Tina's thought about him all these years. And someone like me, who's there for her, never really got her appreciation. "I heard from Tina you're her fiancé," he said. Chin up, lips slightly curved in a smug grin. He was showing off to me. So what if I'm the fiancé? Wasn't she the one who'd complete the wedding ceremony with him? Wasn't she the one exchanging lifelong vows with him? To him, I was just a joke. That wedding, I said, Tina should have explained it to you. I didn't want to engage him much. My mouth tasted sour and bitter. She's not related to me anymore. Arguing with a dying man? That's not my style. I wasn't that desperate or low. What he wants, just let him have it. I walked away quickly. Eric seemed like he had more to say. But when he tried to catch up, he fell. That's when Tina showed up. The situation made her frown a bit. She hurried over to help Eric, gently, like she was worried she'd break him. When her eyes met mine, they became sharp and accusing. "Ben, Eric is a patient." "Yeah, he's a patient. So she can spend the whole night with him without explaining anything, leaving me home to overthink." The next day, she just threw out a few meaningless words, asking me not to leave. I was never her priority. "I didn't do anything, it's your husband who tripped." I emphasized husband in a mocking tone. Her brows knitted tighter, probably because of my attitude. I've always been patient with her. For years, I've hardly shown any edge in front of her. Truly pathetic. Eric looked apologetic, though the smile in his eyes grew. "I fell on my own. It's got nothing to do with Ben. Tina, sometimes I can't control my movements." At that moment, I realized Eric was naturally proud and didn't bother with tricks. He just had to lift a finger, show a little vulnerability, and Tina eagerly rushed over. She never got over him, and she didn't blame him for leaving her before. In the face of life and death, old grudges seemed trivial. At his words, Tina paused, meeting my eyes, at a loss for words. Eric took an orange from her hand, sounding relaxed. "All right, you two must have a lot to talk about. I'll head back to my room, you guys chat." That's when I noticed the orange Tina had peeled perfectly clean. Funny thing, I love oranges, but Tina doesn't. When we first got together, she took me to meet her friends. Introducing me made me feel secure. Back then, I didn't fully know her likes and dislikes. I tried bridging the gap, offering her a slice of orange cake. She froze, lips tightly shut. The atmosphere was silent for a moment. Her friends looked at me. Sweat formed in my palms. Was I doing something wrong? Did I upset her? Someone chimed in. "Tina hates anything orange-flavored, dude. You didn't know? Drink up as a penalty." The mood quickly lightened up, but I still felt a little down. One time when she was drunk, Tina finally told me why. As a kid, she didn't really avoid citrus fruits. Her mom was sick and had a poor appetite, but she especially liked oranges. The house always had them. It was a cold winter. The last time she peeled an orange for her mom, she kissed her cheek and said, "Wait for me at home. By the time you finish that plate of oranges, I'll be back." That day, Tina waited until the last streak of sunset faded, waited as the snow piled up, reaching her ankles, until finally, someone said, "Tina, your mom drowned." Her mom died in that winter. When she got a bit older, Tina learned her mom didn't really love oranges all that much. Her mom was sick, and oranges were cheap and brightly colored, a necessity in the face of illness and life's hardships. Tina's voice caught. After that, I never touched oranges again. That night, her tears were hot. As they rolled onto my skin, they made me cry too. I knew oranges reminded her of her mom, of a tragic, helpless childhood. So later on, I hardly ate them myself. Even citrus-scented perfumes were stashed away, never to be brought out again. Until this moment, seeing that orange in her hand, I finally realized Tina had grown strong enough not to shun them. But I couldn't be her exception. She never cared about what I gave. She never really knew what I liked. But she knew Eric liked oranges. Any sad memory, any unpleasant past could be set aside for his preference. Tina looked at him, worried. Need a nurse? Her concern for him was always blatant. Eric shrugged, smiling brightly. I can walk back myself, Tina. You guys talk. Tina turned to me. Ben? Where did you move to? You? A loud crash interrupted. Eric hadn't gone far and fell again. Before Tina could finish speaking, she turned and rushed to him. I stood there, watching her face full of anxiety, watching her frown deeply over the scrape on his arm. She said, "I warned you not to do it alone. Must have hurt." Huh? The tone wasn't harsh, it was more like playful banter. She asked, "Can you still walk?" Eric shook his head. So, she helped him up. They walked away in the opposite direction. Eric held onto her arm, turned his head to look at me, and flashed a big smile. His smug look said 3 words. I won. He used the same trick again. Dumb, but it worked like a charm. My stomach churned. I spun around and made a dash for the bathroom at the end of the hallway, throwing up like there was no tomorrow. After a long while, Tina finally texted, "Ben, what are you doing at the hospital? Are you feeling okay?" Did she send that a bit too late? She forgot to ask yesterday. 2. Why was I even at her wedding? I shook my head and chuckled bitterly to myself. Then, I blocked her on everything. Tina found out about my tumor eventually. Mike had a sorry look on his face. "Ben, I'm really sorry. I swear I'll have a talk with Wendy when I get back." But Wendy, on the other end, said, "Ben, you two have been through so much together. Give Tina a chance and maybe the baby too." Mike cursed and snatched the phone from my hand, yelling at Wendy. What Tina did was unforgivable. Ben's too nice. If it were me, I'd snap her arm off and let her and Eric live as 2 happy cripples. It's funny how things turned out. Mike's my buddy. Wendy's Tina's childhood friend. We helped set them up, you know? Only took 2 years for them to tie the knot. They just picked up their marriage license. Just need the ceremony now. Meanwhile, Tina and I? 7 years and ended like this. Tina showed up, though. She ran over, sweating like crazy, looked worried sick. Seeing me still outside the operating room made her breathe a sigh of relief. She pulled me into a tight hug, like she'd lose me if she let go. "Ben, I messed up. Please don't do anything rash. Let's just talk it out. Okay?" There was a faint smell of smoke on her. Tina's dad died of lung cancer, so she rarely smoked. She'd only light up when she was really stressed. These days, she'd been running around, searching for doctors and treatments for Eric. Even people came asking me about it. They tried to subtly check if I was okay. Do these people really think I could get Tina this worked up? It's hilarious. Even stronger than the smoke was the scent of jasmine. A couple days ago at the hospital, I picked up that familiar scent on Eric. Suddenly hit me. It was our 2nd year together. Our 5th year knowing each other. Her dad had just passed. Then the company hit a financial snag. Tina couldn't sleep a wink those nights. I was worried sick, so I had the doctor prescribe some herbal medicine to calm her nerves. Took half a day off just to brew it for her. That day, I sat by that pot of soup waiting. Waited late into the night, only to hear, "Ben, I need some space. Going out for a bit." No worries. She came back days later with that jasmine scent on her. Turns out she'd gone to Eric. He was her only emotional anchor. The real kicker? When I asked about the scent, she handed me a bottle of perfume. "A gift for you. The salesgirl let me try it, I thought you'd like it." Even when she went to clear her head, she remembered to bring me something. Made me think she loved me a lot. Wiped away all the fights we'd had. Our relationship took off after that. She'd stick close to me, nestled in my neck. Too bad it took until now for me to get it. She didn't really like me much. Just the jasmine scent I carried. Without knowing, I'd become her stand-in for Eric. Poor substitute. Aside from the scent, we had nothing in common. I pulled away from her hug and slapped her hard. She stood there in shock, holding her cheek, at a loss. Mike looked at me. "Ben, what are you doing?" I covered my mouth and ran back to the bathroom. I threw up hard, like I was trying to hurl out my guts. Mike handed me a bottle of water, patting my back to help. "Why are you throwing up like this? You really got it bad." Tina stood at the doorway, a bit of concern slipping from her eyes. Her pale cheek bore the angry red mark of my hand. I glared at her. "Do you know how much you disgust me? That perfume, you picked it deliberately, right? Just like Eric's scent." She knew exactly what I was talking about. Her face went white as a sheet. What the hell was she thinking while doing all this? Didn't she make herself sick too? "Ben, just listen to me. I didn't know any better back then. I thought it was the scent calming me down. Later I realized it was you. Ben, I really do want to marry you." I scoffed. "Sure, two choices. You either get Eric out of our lives for good, or it's over between us, and I never want to see you again." Tina froze. Seemed like she was really thinking about it. Mike shouted, "What's there to think about? Ben, obviously. You've known each other 7 years. Together for 4. Did you forget all that?" But Tina didn't seem to see it that way. She murmured, "But he's dying, Ben, he's dying. He's a ballet dancer with ALS. Do you know that kind of despair?" Her words felt like a mockery. Eric just lost a life, but I lost love. How ridiculous. "Tina, you're my girlfriend. Do you feel sorry for him? Sorry enough to marry him? Sorry enough to ignore my feelings and run to him over and over? Do you pity him? Or are you still not over him? Can you even tell the difference? Using his illness as an excuse to cover up lingering feelings. Stubborn like a rock." Tina didn't say anything else. She just clenched her fists so tightly her knuckles turned white, but she still couldn't give an answer. Then, a ringtone shattered the dead silence. Tina pulled out her phone. There was chaos on the other end. Someone was shouting, "Get over here. Eric's going to hurt himself. He doesn't want to live." She panicked instantly, and just then, the nurse called me into surgery. She had already made her choice. I smiled and said, "Go ahead. Don't let him really die or you'll hate me forever." Getting hated by someone like that would be bad karma. Tina looked at me, pleading with her eyes. "Ben, promise me. Let's talk when I get back. Okay?" I just curled my lips. My fingernails dug into my palm. 7 years, it was like feeding a dog. Another phone call. Urgent again. Mike angrily said, "Tina, do you even have a conscience left?" Her face showed visible anxiety. She was really scared. Scared that Eric might actually jump off a building. Mike was furious. "Eric's just a manipulator. Can't you see that?" Of course, she could see it. Tina wasn't dumb. She was enabling him, afraid of that tiny chance he'd go through with it. "Ben, please wait for me. We'll decide when I'm back." I said nothing. She turned to Mike. "Mike, I beg you, don't let him go in." Mike snapped. "Handle it yourself. Are you even a woman?" I told her to wait. Then I twisted off the bottle cap and poured the rest of the mouthwash water on her head. "Tina, we're done. Don't come looking for me." Drops trailed down her face, dripping to the floor. Looked pretty dumb. The water stung her eyes red. She stared at me, whispered a sorry, watched her run away. I felt like such a failure. Mike stomped his foot. That wicked woman. Then he asked me, Ben, are you okay? I'm good. I knew she wouldn't choose me. Even if she did, even if Eric got completely out of our lives, we couldn't go back. What's broken can't be fixed. When I woke up, Wendy was there too. I suddenly remembered something. Wendy, I've got 2 rings in my bag. Can you return them to Tina for me? Those wedding rings were whatever. Tina wasn't even thinking when she picked them. Too hung up on Eric. I don't need them. Wendy nodded and left. Mike sat beside me. Ben, Tina's not worth it. I knew the tumor news about me was something he deliberately leaked to Wendy. 7 years, letting go is easier said than done. He thought it was just about Eric that caused a misunderstanding between me and Tina. He had no clue they held a wedding. He didn't know that because of Eric, Tina abandoned me again and again. But now he fully understood. Wendy sent him a video. Mike didn't hide it from me, played it right there. In the video, Tina was holding Eric. They clung to each other, crying. He said, I don't want to be in the hospital. It's so stuffy. I don't like it here. Tina agreed to everything. He said, I want to see the world, dance ballet again. He broke down. Tina kept saying yes. He closed his eyes. Tears rolled down his cheeks. See how tender. Fate's been so cruel to those 2 lovebirds. Made me sick. Mike showed me the video to push me to be more heartless. She was always clear-headed. After the hospital observation period, Wendy and Mike took me home. Just got in the car. Tina showed up. She held the ring box I returned, looking a bit dazed. Mike frowned. Stop acting like the victim. Didn't you bring this on yourself? I chuckled. If you're really that in love, just die with him. Don't show up in front of me again. With that, her blank face cracked. Pain, sadness, guilt leaked out. Her eyes turned crimson. I had nothing more to say. Stomach ached fiercely. Even breathing had to be handled gently. Mike exploded, shouting, empty your heart so who comes later can fit comfortably. Such a simple truth, why can't you get it? Tina, Ben waited 7 years for you. And Eric? He dumped you, yet you run back to him like a fool. You know you're being pathetic? Gave your heart to the dogs, it's bad luck. Tina didn't argue at all. Mike went to shut the car door. She reached out, holding the door. Ben, he'll leave our lives. Mike rolled his eyes, smirking. Didn't you just say you wanted to travel the world with him? Guess it's fool the first, fool the second, huh, Tina? You want both, that's greedy. I'm closing the door now, your hand gets stuck. Won't be able to take care of your old flame. Tina remained unmoved. No matter how Mike cursed, she wouldn't let go. Wendy got out, tried reasoning with her. You should leave now, what you did was just wrong. Don't force us to give you a punch. Tina just stared at me. Ben, those were just to calm him down. I'll explain it to him. She opened the ring box and handed one of the rings over to me. We can go back to how things were. We'll get married and we'll have kids. Wendy shook her head over and over, then pried open each of her fingers. Tina looked at me, trembling lips. She almost overflowed with pleading in her eyes. The car started. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Tina stood there, staring at the direction I was leaving. She knew the consequences when she decided to leave me. She was just putting on a pathetic act to show her deep feelings. Mike looked where I was looking and scoffed. What a drama queen! The days after, I stayed in my rental apartment to recover. Mike came to see me often. She said, Tina keeps bugging Wendy, asking for your address. It's driving me crazy. I laughed and continued eating my orange pudding. One day, I got a call from Eric. He asked me to meet up and talk. I gladly accepted. When I got to the cafe, he was already there. Setting aside our grudges, Eric is the kind of guy who catches your eye. He's really handsome. He said, Tina's been relying on you all these years. Thanks. I chuckled. Do you know what you look like now? Like a smug little thief, knowing you've stolen someone else's fruit. And you're still proud, not ashamed. Pretty shameless. Some things just have to be said. Eric stirred his coffee, not a hint of anger on his face. Feelings aren't like planting vegetables. I'm dying, so I'm dropping everything to reclaim her. You can only blame yourself. I gave you 7 years, and you still couldn't win her heart. He said that, chin up with a bright smile, acting like a victor. He truly believes that his death will keep Tina's love forever sealed. He thinks he'll be the indelible mark on her heart. Irreplaceable. I laughed at his naivety. You're dying, what can you hold on to? If you're that skilled, Tina should refuse to marry anyone else, even follow you to the underworld. Eric, I know the living can't compete with the dead, but after you're gone, can you guarantee she won't meet someone else like you? He knows better than me how exceptional Tina is. Beautiful, wealthy. She's bound to attract endless suitors. Eric's smile froze on his face. I continued stirring the pot. Wanna bet, after you die, she'll beg me to take her back? He didn't just meet me to flaunt his victory. He's scared. Lately, Tina's been asking around about me, even changing numbers to call me. He must know all this. He came to test my stance, to disgust me, to make me give up for good. Too bad. I moved on from that mess long ago. I smirked and said, if I don't take her back, do you think she'll pine for someone dead for years or crave for me, who's right in front of her, unreachable? I took a sip of coffee. Pretty bitter. Eric, you know better how twisted Tina can be. Is it that she can't have you, or is she deeply in love? He pressed his lips, silent. Seems like even he isn't sure. Die gracefully in her arms. Maybe she'll remember you for a few more years. Leaving him with that bit of advice, I got up and left. He was like a withering rose, desperately soaking up love from others as he neared death. To prove his existence, to highlight his significance. Quite pathetic. They can continue their epic, soulful love story. It no longer concerns me. After some time recovering, I accepted a headhunter's offer and joined a new company. This city isn't too big or too small, but big enough to avoid running into people you said goodbye to. It's kind of silly. When Tina and I first got together, I quit my job to help her. Once her career stabilized, I went back to my field. Apart from emotions, it was a valuable job experience. But it did throw off my career plans. Looking back now, it feels like I wasted true feelings on a dead end. Months went by pretty quietly. One day, Mike came over with an invitation. Their wedding had been postponed for various reasons. Finally set in this winter. Mike asked, Tina will be there too. Does it bother you? If it does, I'll tell Wendy to keep her away. Wendy's known Tina for a long time. They promised to be each other's bridesmaids. Can't let me affect the wedding. I shook my head. Don't bother about me. It's your wedding, do whatever makes you happy. Soon the wedding day arrived. Tina, as a bridesmaid, followed closely behind Wendy. In her white dress, she resembled how she looked when we first met. She probably doesn't remember, but I do. It was an autumn day. I failed the graduate school entrance exams, and job prospects seemed bleak. I sat at the pavilion on the hill behind my school, suddenly missing my mom. If she were here, she'd make me some braised pork. After I'd eaten, she'd encourage me to keep going. But she wasn't there. I stood on the hilltop. Sorry. For a moment, I wanted to throw it all away. Jump off. That's when I saw Tina. Back then, she had just started her successful business, full of vigor. She stood beside me, seemingly casually said, "This is the best view in the school, you can see a rainbow." I looked where she was looking and indeed saw a rainbow, so breathtakingly beautiful. Suddenly, I felt relieved. The weight on my shoulders didn't seem so heavy anymore. It might have just been an offhand comment, but I held on to it for years. 3 years later, I met her again. Then, 7 years of entanglement ensued. Unlike back then, she now looked weary. She saw me too. The atmosphere was lively, but she just stood there, unmoving, watching me. Her gaze was complicated. I turned slightly to help Mike adjust his collar, dodging her eyes. Mike carried Wendy downstairs. Wendy's place is in an old neighborhood, no elevators, just stairs. There were tons of people. A kid accidentally bumped into me. I almost lost my balance. Just as I was about to fall, Tina grabbed me. The moment we touched, I caught a whiff of smoke and jasmine. A familiar wave of nausea washed over me. Once steady, I pushed her away with effort. Don't touch me. She stepped back a few paces, leaning against the railing to barely keep steady. With her eyes down, she looked defeated, her expression quite hurt. Where she touched felt like goosebumps. Ben, watch your step. Her voice was as gentle as ever. That tone makes it seem like we still had something going. I ignored her and turned to walk downstairs. When I got to the hotel, I noticed Eric was there. He was in a wheelchair, looking pale, all vulnerable as usual. He called softly, Tina. Tina frowned slightly but ran up to him anyway. Mike glanced at Wendy beside him. Wendy quickly distanced herself. I didn't invite him. He looked at me. Maybe he's afraid Tina would be snatched away. Thieves fear fellow thieves the most. I raised an eyebrow. I'm no thief. Wendy shrugged. People with dirty minds think everyone else is dirty too. Mike chuckled coldly. Fine, if he's shameless, then I won't be polite. Soon it was time. Love Story played in the background. In her white wedding gown, Wendy slowly approached Mike. Standing in the crowd, I couldn't help but get teary. I hadn't noticed Tina had come near until she handed me a tissue. I didn't take it. That's when I noticed the wedding ring on her finger. Quite a show. Didn't pick it with any emotion. Yet after the split, she refused to take it off, pretending to be sentimental. Eric wheeled in. Tina, we never exchanged rings. Tina didn't answer, turning to look at me. She seemed to seek some sadness or regret on my face. But she would be disappointed. I watched the couple on stage, smiling brightly, cheering for them to kiss. Tina lowered her eyes. That could have been us on stage, right? Her voice was soft, barely audible in the crowd. But I heard it. So did Eric. His lips trembled badly. He surely knew the ush meant was her and me. Mike once suggested a group wedding for the four of us. Back then, we were all close. Such a suggestion naturally passed unanimously. I didn't expect Tina to remember that. Wanting both what's in the bowl and the pot. It's disgusting. I took a step back. Just then, a bouquet suddenly hit Eric on the head. Mike took the microphone. Oops, how'd that hit you? Weren't you married? Said you were terminally ill and just wanted one wedding, so you snatched someone's fiancé. No license, just a forced wedding in a suit. Clever. Really clever. People love gossip. Upon hearing this, guests who were quietly eating all looked up, seeking the subject of interest. I moved further to the side. Eric held the bouquet, face ashen. Murmurs erupted around. Some even took out their phones to record. Oh my, how could someone this handsome be a homewrecker? Terminal illness isn't an excuse to steal a fiancé. They were about to get married and he pulled this stunt. Shameless. That girl's no good either. Perfect match for him. Wendy cleared her throat for show. Mike winked at me, handing back the mic to the host. He was standing up for me. At Eric's wedding, I too faced malicious speculation from his friends and family. Eric seemed lost. He instinctively looked to Tina for help. Yet she merely looked at me, seeming like she wanted to speak but didn't. Tina. Tina didn't respond. Eric's eyes quickly filled with tears. Words are powerful. He hurriedly looked down and wheeled himself out. Surprisingly, Tina didn't chase after him. Ben, we didn't get a marriage certificate. I really regret it. When someone is sick for a long time, even the most loyal person can falter. Especially with a man who once abandoned her. Whatever resentment and unfulfilled love she had were likely long worn away. Mike teasingly said, "Aren't you going after him? Might throw a fit and threaten suicide again. I don't want the murder charges on me." Tina gave me a deep look and left. Wendy spat, "That Eric has no sense. Seeing him makes me feel unlucky." Mike hugged her and gently touched her belly. "Calm down, babe. Don't stress out the baby." Mike chuckled, "You should stay away from someone as clueless as Tina too." All right, I'll listen to you." Later, I heard Eric vanished. Mike was eating cherries Wendy washed, looking all disdainful. Still playing games. Huh? He thinks he's something? The more he does, the more Tina will hate it. I chuckled, he's not trying, he's scared. I heard that by the mid-stages of ALS, daily life becomes mostly unmanageable. He's scared Tina will see him at his worst. He wants to die beautifully, as a nice memory for Tina. More than mutual pain, he wants her regret. That way, she'd remember him longer. Looks like he listened to what I said at the cafe that day. Later, Mike told me more. Tina found Eric. Because of his depression and not continuing treatment, the disease progressed fast. Tina felt immense guilt and actually planned to travel the world with him. But her company couldn't stop. Before long, there was a new GM. Cold turned to spring and spring to fall. Eric died that winter. Mike sighed. Eric had it rough. If he hadn't pulled those stunts, I'd probably feel sorry for him. I thought for a moment, same here. Saying this isn't about being overly compassionate. It's just mutual understanding between people. Not long after, due to a poor decision, Tina's company took a big hit. She's in over her head right now. When Mike told me the news, he was grinning. That lousy company should have gone under long ago. How could it have done so well without my family's Ben? I was reviewing project proposals on my computer and nodded repeatedly. Good thing I got out while I could. Eventually, Tina showed up. Honestly, she had already figured out where I lived. A while back, one night, I woke up and went to the bathroom in the dark. For some reason, I glanced downstairs. I happened to see her standing outside my building. The dim light fell over her, making her look lonely. God knows how long she had been standing there. I quickly closed the curtain and didn't look again. This time, she had lost a lot of weight. She seemed well put together, but there was a tiredness she couldn't hide. On her ring finger, she still wore that wedding ring. Ben, can I come in for a bit? I crossed my arms and stood in the doorway. If there's something you want to say, do it here. Seeing how firm I was, she didn't push. Ben, I miss you. She sighed, her tone world weary. The day Eric died, I wasn't as sad as I thought I'd be. But every day without you is terrible. Look, Eric, do you still think you won? Tina fished out that men's ring again. Ben, I can't do this without you. How can I keep going? She really is naive. Back in the hospital, I didn't accept that ring. And I'm not about to now. I replied sharply. Oh, lost your first love and now you remember me? Maybe she was a little sincere in coming to me for help. But mostly, I'd bet she's seeing my value and wants me to help her bounce back. She brought this on herself. Can't blame anyone else. Tina frowned. Ben, don't be like that. That's not like you. I shrugged. Speak human to humans, speak dog to dogs. Mike and I have always been on the same page. But because I cared about her, I held back. But she didn't appreciate it. She sounded so sure. Those 7 years can't be so easy for you to move past. I shook my head with a smile. I've always been able to move on quickly. She's the one fooling herself. Tina, you think everyone is as fickle as you? She bit her lip and said, Eric and I never got the marriage certificate. I replied sarcastically, why tell me? Want me to congratulate you for holding your ground? By downplaying your love for him, you're just exaggerating your feelings for me. Tina, it's honestly a bit gross. Saying you can't live without someone. You probably said that to Eric too. If I agreed, you might say the same thing to the next guy. It's such a shame we got tangled up for too long. It wasn't until Eric came back that I saw her true colors. I started to close the door and said, sorry. Gotta go clean up. My girlfriend's waiting. Tina looked stunned. I don't believe you. Don't believe it? I raised an eyebrow, thinking how ridiculous she was. Check outside, the one with the Lamborghini is my girlfriend, taller, prettier, and younger than you. She really walked to the end of the hall and peeked out the window. Her face turned ashen. With a thud, I shut the door. Over the phone, a new intern spoke up excitedly. Hey dude, when am I gonna get hired full-time?